Welcome to this conversation that we're having now about missing in Brooks County. One hour and 17 minutes of what I would say is pretty gripping and sobering video, a very compelling documentary that reminds us of where we really are in this country right now. And to me, it's a very personal story. Having lived along the U.S.-Mexico border for a fair amount of my life, knowing very well the geography and the communities in that part of Texas, having spent what I would say is good quality time getting to know the people there and understanding the difficulties that families have gone through and continue to live through because of a policy change in 1994. It's pretty stunning that we have now 20,000 people who are believed to have died trying to make their way across the US-Mexico border. Imagine that, and imagine if this were to happen anywhere else in the world to perhaps any other group of people, the outcry that would result from this phenomena. Yet here we are, and it is frightening to me to think that this is an issue that we continue to live with, more so for the families that continue to suffer through this tragedy. So thank you for being with us. And I want to welcome to this conversation the filmmakers, Kate Spradley and I'm sorry, well, not filmmakers, but two central characters from the film, Kate Spradley and Michelle Chinos, and also the filmmaker, Jeff Bemiss. And thank you for being here, thank you for taking the time to be with us and talking about this fascinating work. And my name is Ricardo Sandoval-Palos. I am the public editor at PBS. I'm the ombudsman, as it were, the viewer's representative inside the network. I'm also dedicating some time to the National Association of Hispanic Journalists and a project they have called Palabra, which is a digital publishing platform that's publishing the work of freelance members from the organization. We have a number of stories that are coming to us from that very region in Texas that you're talking about here. This is why this is a very personal and very close story to my heart. So I want to start off by just asking a question of Kate. Kate, tell us, why is it that we're still here at this point, so long after this policy change, so long after we have thousands upon thousands of people who have died or disappeared in that stretch of Texas, in that stretch of the US-Mexico border, yet nothing has changed? Do you see anything on the horizon that's gonna bring about some kind of a change for the families down in that area?
I think that's a great question. And I think to answer it, it's important to contrast Texas to other border states. And Arizona receives a lot of border deaths, but they have a medical examiner on the border, and they receive the majority of these migrant deaths, and they have an anthropologist. They work with non-governmental organization. Everybody is working together to facilitate identifications. And Texas, the shared border with Mexico, is so large, and you have one medical examiner on the border, and then all the other counties, it's a justice of the peace that's responsible for the deaths. And there's a lack of education, there's a lack of training for these justices of the peace. You know, they're often unsure what the laws are, what they have to do. It's single-handedly not their fault. It's a systemic breakdown in every step of the process. You have federal legislation, and then you have the smallest local jurisdictions, and often the poorest in the country, that are responsible for these deaths. So until something changes on that level, we're going to be where we are today, also tomorrow.
Right. It's just fascinating to me that in other places you have efforts that seem to be at least making some headway, some progress. I spent a fair amount of time in Tucson at the Mexican consulate.
Yes.
Where they have a call center, actually. And families in Mexico and in other countries now can call in and give characteristics, give names, last seen to people who are taking this information and then spreading out via phone. and making phone calls all over the country to see if any connections can be made, right? So it seems to me that at least there's a handful of people who have this in mind and perhaps are trying to do something about this. Yet we have the problem still, and it has not changed.
Yes, Eddie Canales with the South Texas Human Rights Center is wonderful for that. He's doing that in Texas.
Yes, yes, and that was so fantastic to see that effort continues, in some places against the odds, you know. So it's just very encouraging. And I want to welcome Michelle. Michelle, listen, first off, I'm so sorry what's happened to you and to your family, right? And it just it seems to me like this is something that, you know, a lot of people can't relate to. I mean, obviously with the pandemic now, there's a lot of tragedy going around this country, you know, more tragedy than we have time to spare, I think. But in your case, in your family's case, this is something that just lingers and lingers. And I'm wondering, what are you doing today to continue the search, to continue trying to get some closure in this case?
Yes, hi, good afternoon. So, I mean, we're in the process of going back to Brooks County to Falfurrias, Texas, to speak with Eddie, to see if there's new information, new binders where we could probably see if, you know, they've found anything that we can find. Of course, if we go, which we're gonna put posters all around Brooks County like we did with his picture or phone number. We're still hoping he's out there. You know, this film can help also see him. If somebody sees him, maybe he's out there and lost his memory, and maybe he sees this film, or anybody sees him and can recognize him. But we still haven't lost hope. We feel that he's still out here somewhere, and we wish we could see him. But yeah, we just want closure. We just want to have him, or to know where he is, or if he's, you know, I mean, if he's out there, just to find him.
Right. Jeff, listen, I think this is just a monumental work that you've completed here. And it is interesting to me that someone, I mean, listen, this started in 1994. And I remember talking to my editors when I was a correspondent in Mexico, talking to the editors in the US, and telling them, hey, listen, people are dying on the border. I think we should do something about it. And getting crickets back from my editors back then, telling me that it's not a story that would really resonate with our readers and so forth and so on. And we've seen what's happened since, right? And so I'm curious and really interested to know, what was it? What was the spark that led you to this story? And where you decided that, where you and Lisa decided that you had to put this on tape, as it were, and put it on record?
I first heard about this problem of people disappearing on the U.S. side of the border from my sister-in-law, who's from Mexico. And I really had not heard that much about it. A little bit later, I happened to hear a radio story on NPR, as a matter of fact, about a forensic scientist at Baylor University, Lori Baker, who was doing the work that you see Kate Spradley doing in the film. And the story really moved me. And I sent it to Lisa Malamat, who's the co-director of the film. She had the same reaction I did. So we reached out to Lori, who was very friendly. She said, you know, why don't y'all come on out? So we did. And she took us to this town called Falfurrias in Brooks County, Texas. And we asked her, could you show us the border, please? And she said, no, there's no border here. This is 70 miles north of the border. And that was the beginning of Lisa and I realizing that the story that should be told was really the story of this place, Brooks County, Texas.
Yeah, and it's had you known about Kate's work in that time frame? And how did you come across her? It seems to me like it's a filmmaker's gold mine, basically, to find an individual with a team such as Kate that's doing the work that the team is doing. It reminds me of the work that was being done by the Argentine forensics teams in places like Ciudad Juarez, and trying to solve puzzles, trying to get closure for families. So did that come after? And what kind of landscape did you come across when you first got there?
Kate may remember the details of how we got together for this film better than I do, but Lori did make the introduction. Kate can certainly tell you about the Argentine forensic team, who I know she works with very closely. But yeah, it was through Lori Baker at Baylor University.
And Kate, do you continue to work in Brooks County? I mean, does the effort continue? Are you trying anything new, perhaps?
Yes, so we're still working in Brooks County in the same cemetery that you saw in the film. And I think that Jeff and Lisa, because they were always there and they were always filming, they really caught, I think, the moment where I realized this is not something we can solve just in this one excavation. We're going to be here for years. So we're engaging more with the community. We're finding that we can find these unidentified remains when members of the community come forward and share their knowledge about what they remember about where people were buried. So we've been back to that cemetery and excavated about 4 additional times. We have about 30 more areas of interest, and we're doing, we're using geophysical methods. We're trying to use some new aerial imagery as well and new technologies to try to better define areas of interest in the cemetery, because this is a community cemetery and everybody's family's buried there. So we want to be respectful of that as well. But we really want to try to find the unidentified people who were buried and forgotten.
Right, and it would occur to me perhaps in that process that you may have reached out to the state government or to even the U.S. federal government to tell them, hey, there's a crisis down here. What kind of reception have you gotten when you make those kinds of inquiries?
We've certainly reached out to both the state and federal government, and working with the South Texas Human Rights Center, we have been able to get funding from the state. So we are now funded right now through grant funding from the Office of the Governor, and that has allowed us to go in and do all of this comprehensive work and find these remains and bring them back to the lab to facilitate identification. And that's really been the key. This early on was volunteer efforts, and that's not sustainable. So we really rely on that state funding to keep us going.
Now in the film, I see sometimes the look on your face of it's a mix of frustration and almost, dare I say, resignation, right? Have you ever thought to yourself, this is a never-ending loop, and maybe our time is better spent elsewhere? Have you ever thought of just giving up?
Well, it's always a never-ending loop. I think we've realized that this is something it's been going on a long time. It's going to continue, but I've personally never thought of giving up, and part of the reason is you have families like Michelle and Omar right here who are looking. They really want answers. And I will be the first to say there's no one agency that can tackle this problem. If it's just one person doing it, it's easy to give up. But we have a lot of collaborative partners with the South Texas Human Rights Center. We work with the Argentine Forensic Anthropology team, the Colibri Center for Human Rights. So when you see me working in that cemetery, it's because a lot of work and a lot of collaboration with other agencies have gone into that work. And so, working with other people makes it easier to move forward. That's
right. That's good. Thank you. And Michelle, I'm wondering, all this time later, how is the family doing? How are your parents doing?
Yes, so it's my husband's brother,
right,
who's my my in-law. So, they're okay, but they're not. We haven't lost hope. We want to find him. We want a miracle to happen, for him to come out from somewhere and be like, hey, I'm here. I've been gone these years, but I'm here. And if not, I mean, like I said in the film, if not, we just want to find either his remainings and know where he's at. And like I said, leave him flowers, leave so my daughter can see, hey, this is where your uncle is. You met him when you were a baby, but this is now where he is, and for the whole family to know. It's just, we feel desperate not knowing anything. We don't even know if he's alive. We don't know if he's dead. We feel hopeless. It's something that, like my sister-in-law said, are we supposed to be having fun? Is it okay? Like, life keeps on going, but like my husband said, we have that empty feeling inside that, each night we go to bed and we're like, where is he?
Yeah.
So, I mean, my in-laws, you can imagine when it's Christmas, when it's his birthday, when, those Thanksgiving, those special moments that it gets to them, when it's Father's Day, when it's Mother's Day, it really gets to them because not his whole family is not together anymore. And it hurts all of us. But
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't lost hope, and we hope that one day we can have closure to this.
Right.
Can I just say on that
Sure.
for a second? If lawmakers could meet the families of the missing, they would feel differently about the policies that they're creating. So I would urge anyone who sees the film and is moved by Michelle's story or any of the stories to tell their friends and tell their lawmakers, especially their lawmakers, not just to see the film, but to meet some families of the missing so that they can understand the effect their policies are having.
Yeah, it's again, it's something that's always been stunning to me, that you make a decision that it's worth it for some people perhaps to perish or to go missing, to exercise a control that has never worked along this vast border. Yet we're comfortable as a nation with it, it seems to me. So I think, yes, that if more politicians were to go into those communities, go into Falfurrias and meet with the families, there might be perhaps a different outcome down the road. And Michelle, and this is for both of you, for you and Jeff, some people might look at this and say, well, how could the family allow someone to come into their pain? So to someone to come into their lives in such a public way that we're going to put you on film as you go through this tragedy. And when did the family decide, and what was behind that decision to allow the filmmakers to come into your lives and put everything on the record, as it were?
Yes, so it was really hard, especially for my in-laws, to talk about it, especially in a film, is really hard for them. But like I told them, this a lot of people is going to see this film and is going to is going to see what we're going through and many families are going through. And maybe one day, like I said, somebody can recognize him. He could see himself if he lost his memory. It was really hard for them to do this film, to be a part of it. But at the same time, they understood that we want to find him, and we're making anything that we can, that's in our hands, to find him. And I mean, we went for it.
That's good. That's good. Right. And Jeffrey, I mean, I think that presents a good question for you, right? We always want access when we're doing these stories. We need to be there, to be on the ground, as it were, to have that face-to-face with the people who are a part of this story. And I have to say that you got some pretty amazing access. I mean, not just to the family, right, but also to the vigilante groups. And I do have to ask a question. I mean, you raise a couple of times in the film where the vigilantes are saying that Eddie Canales, who's a central character in this, has nefarious connections and nefarious ties. and then it's almost like you leave it, right? So I'm wondering, with the access, was that an area that you didn't want to go too far into, or describe that scene? And I thought it was a very fascinating piece of filmmaking there.
Right. It took us about 3 years to get for the Texas Board of Volunteers, the vigilante group, to actually invite us on an operation. And there's a scene that you're referring to where Dr. Mike Vickers, who leads that group, speculates that Eddie Canales is working with smugglers, and that's how he knows where to put water stations, and that he is not really doing it for pure reasons. I mean, I think most people who watch the film are going to understand that that just doesn't hold together. Everybody can draw their own conclusions. Of course, we were trying to treat the audience as intelligent and capable of making their own conclusions. But the idea that Lisa and I had was to really paint a 360-degree portrait of Brooks County. And it may be that, I mean, I couldn't believe that Dr. Vickers made that accusation. A lot of people couldn't believe it, but I suspect when he sees the film, and he hasn't yet, he'll probably say that we've represented his point of view exactly the way he intended it, because that's what it is to be absorbed in your own worldview.
Yeah, and that's a reality for him. It's interesting also that the reality of the group is that more often than not, they find themselves at midnight sitting in lawn chairs, looking at nothing, right? And so yeah, that's why I said it's really good filmmaking that way, and it really kind of did show us the reality of life in that part of Texas. This is a wide open country, except for the fences, right, of these vast ranches, yet there seemed to be not a sameness to any of your shots. Did you have to work at that, given the landscape that you were working with there? Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. That landscape is, I'd be curious to know Kate and Michelle's impression of it as well. I mean, there is a beauty to it. When Lisa and I first arrived in Brooks County, I don't think we understood the ranch culture, because some of these ranches that are private land, and that's what's different about Texas borderland, some of them are a third the size of Rhode Island. And we thought, what do you do with all that land? But we really did get to appreciate the beauty of it. However, it is inhospitable. I mean, everything there wants to poke you or bite you or do you in some way. So we had to be careful as we were shooting.
Right. And Kate, how long have you been there now? If you can add up the amount of time that you've put into this.
Amount of time I've been in South Texas working, a lot. It's hard to say. I think since 2015, every few months, I think that we're down there. But we do exhumations twice a year. So that's about 2.5, 3 weeks of exhumations twice a year, plus the field work that it takes to get to that point, plus just going down periodically to maintain relationships with county officials. So it's fairly frequent. It's 3 hours away, so it's not.
Yeah, and it does seem like you have a number of what appear to be students or that kind of support. I know that in many universities along the border, there are a number of schools that operate programs where the students themselves go out and give this kind of support to efforts in Arizona and California as well.
Yes, there is no shortage of students who want to help. I don't ever have to ask for help. Students usually come to me, and Texas State University is a Hispanic serving institution, and a lot of our undergraduates that come with us on these trips are from the Valley. So this work is very meaningful to them because it takes place in their backyard, in their community.
And before we go to the last word, and I want to give Michelle the last word here, but Jeff, what's next for the film? After the screening here at Double Exposure, what are the plans for further showings, or perhaps some theatrical showings as well?
We do have some other film festivals we're really excited to be playing in. And the film will be broadcast on Independent Lens next year.
Yeah.
And we're very excited about that.
That's great. All right. And Michelle, listen, I want to ask you, and this will be our final question here, but let's say we bring some politicians down from Washington to meet with you and the family. What would you ask them? What would you tell them that you think would be necessary for them to hear, given that they're so far away and so far removed from this tragedy?
I mean, I would say, why a border? We're all humans here. We're all the same. You know, we're brothers, we're sisters. Why so many people have to put their lives on risk by crossing the border, by coming here to have a better future, when we can all be the same? I mean, I just see that, people in Mexico have to suffer a lot, have to go through so many things just to come here to the United States to work, to send money to their families. Why have a border? Why we have to be in between that to, but I mean, I would tell them that, why can't we all be together? Why do so many people have to die to come here, or have to be missing, like my brother-in-law?
Right. Okay. Well, thank you to the three of you. The work you're doing is vital, Kate, and continue doing it, please. It's so necessary. That part of Texas has suffered a lot. Yeah, you know that well. So I'm glad that you're able to continue that work. Michelle, continue to hold out hope, and then relay that to the family, please, that we're thinking of the family, and that we hope that one day you're able to close that loop. Okay. And
Thank
Jeff,
you.
congratulations. I think this is an achievement as a documentary. This is something that everybody in this country ought to see. Given the political environment that we have these days, it's really, I think, important to see the humanity behind something that we just too often see as headlines and as political chatter here in DC. So thank you again for this.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Film is missing in Brooks County, and appreciate everybody who's joining us today. Look for it. Continue enjoying the programming here at the Investigative Film Festival. This is a wonderful gathering of journalists, filmmakers, people who are involved in these kinds of stories. Let's continue that support. Thank you.